Clara and David Mitchell looked like the perfect couple until one ordinary night revealed a chilling secret that turned love into murder and exposed a killer who forgot one deadly detail. Everything was recorded. David and Clara Mitchell lived in a quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood in the town of Pine Hill, a place where everyone knew each other by name and front doors were rarely locked. Their house sat on a corner lot, always tidy, with trimmed hedges and a red mailbox that Clara painted herself every spring. From the outside, their life looked calm and enviable. David was a high school science teacher, known for his kind demeanor and soft-spoken nature. Students loved him for his patience, and his colleagues admired his dedication. Clara, on the other hand, ran a small bakery business from home, selling cakes and cookies that quickly became local favorites. People said they were the perfect couple, but perfection, as it often is, was just the surface. Inside their neatly decorated home, cracks had started to form in their marriage. The couple had been married for 12 years, and though there were no visible fights or screaming matches, the silence between them had grown louder. David had become distant, often buried in work or lost in thought. Clara, once cheerful and talkative, had grown colder, her words shorter, her glances sharper. Still, nothing seemed too alarming. Friends assumed it was just the natural stress of everyday life. They smiled in public, posed for pictures, and shared dinner at the local diner on Fridays. But something was off. A few months before David's death, a string of petty thefts had occurred in the area. Someone had broken into a few houses, stealing electronics and cash. Clara was the one who pushed for installing a full set of security cameras around their property. She said it was for peace of mind, and David agreed. They set up cameras at the front and back doors, in the living room, and even in the hallway outside their bedroom. Clara managed the system from her laptop, checking the footage every few days. She seemed oddly invested in it, more than most people would be. Nothing suspicious ever showed up, just normal everyday life. Baking, reading, working. David barely paid attention to the cameras after they were installed. But Clara, she always knew they were there. She made sure of it. Neighbors noticed that Clara had stopped coming to local events. She didn't bring cookies to church gatherings anymore. Something in her eyes had changed, darker, more distracted. But everyone dismissed it. No one imagined what would come next. It was a rainy Thursday night when David Mitchell was found dead at the bottom of the staircase inside his home. The official report said he had slipped and fallen, most likely due to the wet floors and the dim lighting. Clara was the one who made the call to emergency services, her voice calm but tearful, saying her husband wasn't breathing. When the paramedics arrived, David was already gone. His body was twisted unnaturally, his head resting in a pool of blood. There were no signs of forced entry, no visible bruises beyond the injuries from the fall, and nothing in the house appeared out of place. The scene looked like a tragic accident. Clara told the police that David had gone upstairs to change after dinner. She had stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up. Then she heard a loud crash, ran to the hallway, and found him at the bottom of the stairs. It all sounded believable. She even showed them the wet footprints near the entryway, claiming he must have slipped in his socks. The officers made a note of everything, but since there were no immediate signs of foul play, the case was closed within 48 hours. The funeral came quickly. It was small, attended by a handful of relatives, a few of David's colleagues, and some neighbors. Clara wore black, her face pale but composed. She cried quietly during the service, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Most people saw her as a grieving widow trying to stay strong. Only David's younger brother, Ethan, sensed that something wasn't right. He had known David his whole life, and something about the timing, the story, and Clara's behavior didn't sit well with him. She wasn't devastated. She was distant. After the funeral, Ethan visited the house to help sort through David's things. Clara seemed uninterested in what was kept or thrown away. She told him to take whatever he wanted. While going through David's office, Ethan found a USB drive labeled backups. It was buried beneath some paperwork in a desk drawer. Clara hadn't mentioned it. He assumed it was full of old photos or documents and slipped it into his pocket without a second thought. That night, Clara slept alone in the house for the first time in years. Rain tapped against the windows as she sat in silence, unaware that the one piece of evidence she had forgotten was already out of her hands. Ethan sat alone in his apartment, the USB drive plugged into his laptop. He wasn't expecting anything unusual, just old family photos, maybe some saved documents or videos. But what he found was much more than that. Inside a folder labeled Cam Backups were dozens of video files, each one marked with dates and times. They appeared to be automatic recordings from the home security cameras David and Clara had installed months earlier. Most of the footage showed normal household activity: Clara baking in the kitchen, David reading on the couch, them watching TV together. But one video had a timestamp that stopped Ethan cold. It matched the exact date and hour of David's death. He opened it, unsure of what he would see. The video began in the kitchen. Clara was standing by the counter, carefully stirring something into a cup of tea. Her movements were slow and focused. She checked the hallway, then continued mixing. After a few moments, she picked up the cup and walked out of frame, heading upstairs. The next clip came from the hallway camera. Clara came into view, entering the bedroom and closing the door behind her. 10 minutes passed with no movement. Then David appeared. He stumbled into the hallway, clutching his stomach, clearly in distress. His steps were uneven, his body shaky. He reached for the wall, trying to keep his balance. As he got closer to the top of the stairs, his legs buckled. He collapsed forward, falling out of frame. Clara appeared seconds later, standing at the top of the staircase, looking down. She didn't run. She didn't call for help. She stood still, watching. Ethan sat frozen in disbelief. He watched the video again to be sure. The signs were unmistakable. David hadn't simply slipped and fallen. Something had been in that tea. Clara had poisoned him, waited until he collapsed, then staged the scene to look like an accident. The horror of the discovery hit Ethan like a wave. His brother had been murdered, and the killer was someone who had smiled at him just days ago. The next morning, Ethan walked into the local police station with the USB drive in his hand. He said nothing at first, just handed it over. The detectives took one look at the footage and knew the case had never been closed. It had only just begun. With the footage in hand, the police reopened the investigation immediately. The video alone was powerful evidence, but they needed more to build an airtight case. Detectives returned to the Mitchell home with a new search warrant. This time, they weren't looking for clues, they were looking for proof of intent. Clara watched silently as they combed through every room, their faces focused, their movements sharp. She didn't ask questions, and she didn't offer help. She just stood there, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. In the garage, officers found several unmarked bottles hidden behind old paint cans. They were sent for testing, and the results confirmed the presence of digitalis, a plant-based poison that could easily be mixed into food or drink without a strong taste. In small doses, it could cause nausea, dizziness, and confusion. In larger amounts, it could stop the heart. The exact same symptoms David had shown before his fall. Investigators also retrieved Clara's laptop. A digital forensic team uncovered deleted browsing history that had been carefully wiped, but not completely erased. The recovered searches told a chilling story. She had looked up untraceable poisons, how to make a death look accidental, and symptoms of fatal tea poisoning. Even more disturbing were bookmarked pages about life insurance payouts. Clara had taken out a new policy on David just 6 months earlier, one that would pay out a large sum in the event of accidental death. She had planned it all. When brought in for questioning, Clara remained calm at first. She denied everything. She said the video was a misunderstanding. The internet searches were just random curiosity, and the poison bottles were for weeds in the garden. But when investigators showed her the full footage, when she saw herself standing at the top of the stairs, watching David die, her mask began to slip. Her hands trembled slightly. Her breathing changed. Then, in a quiet voice, she admitted the truth. She said things had changed between them. She felt ignored, unloved, trapped. She didn't want a divorce. She wanted freedom. And she wanted it without losing the house or the money. Killing David, she believed, was the only way out. It had taken months of planning, and she had thought it was foolproof. But the one thing she didn't plan for, the cameras she had installed herself, became the key to her undoing. Clara Mitchell stood before the courtroom, her face pale, as empty. The trial lasted 2 weeks, but the jury made their decision in just under 2 hours. The evidence was overwhelming. The footage was played multiple times during the proceedings. Each time, silence filled the room as everyone watched the quiet, calculated way Clara had carried out her plan. No outburst, no sudden violence, just a cold, methodical poisoning and a silent wait as her husband collapsed and died. There were no questions left to ask. The poison bottles, the internet searches, the life insurance policy, all of it pointed to premeditation. But it was the video, the clear, undeniable visual of her standing at the top of the staircase, doing nothing to help, that sealed her fate. That one moment, captured without her knowing, told the entire story. Clara was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She showed little emotion when the verdict was read. There were no tears, no apologies, no final words. She simply turned and followed the guards out of the courtroom. To many, it was just another tragic story of a marriage gone wrong. But to those who knew David, it was the painful end to a life that had been full of kindness and potential. Ethan, David's younger brother, never fully recovered from the loss, but he made it his mission to make sure the story was told. He started by sharing the details online. He posted clips of the trial, wrote about the investigation, and titled the story "When a Killer Wife Realizes Everything Was Recorded." It quickly caught the attention of true crime followers around the world. People were stunned not just by the crime, but by how easily it could have gone unnoticed if not for one forgotten USB drive. The story became a cautionary tale about trust, about betrayal, and about the hidden darkness people can carry. Clara had believed her plan was perfect. She had covered every angle, erased every clue, and calculated every step. But the one thing she never expected was that her own surveillance system would turn against her. In the end, it wasn't a witness or a confession that brought her down. It was a camera, a silent, unblinking eye that captured the truth she tried so hard to bury. Everything was recorded, and that recording was what justice needed.